Hello, my name is Andrea. If this is your first time here, welcome. And if you are returning, welcome back. What I explore on this channel is what it's like to become a mother later in life, going all through your 20s and all through your 30s, maybe pursuing career, developing who you are, or, exploring the things you want to explore, to becoming a mom. Now, for me, I became a mom at 40 after being a career-focused, go-getter, driven person, then transitioning to a stay-at-home mom. So today what I want to talk about is why I am choosing to have an unmedicated home birth or birth center birth. Now, I haven't decided between a home birth or a birth center birth just yet, but I can tell you that my first birth with my first baby at 40 was at a birth center, and it was just the most empowering, tremendous experience. And I feel like this is really important to share because so many women have experiences and births that are unbelievably traumatic and disempowering. And I want to be really careful with how I talk about some of this stuff, but what I do believe is that we as women, especially in the United States, we are educated to believe that our bodies are broken, that naturally the default is going to be some sort of dysfunction, that being able to birth unmedicated or without, some sort of medical intervention is abnormal, that most women would go through some sort of difficulty or medical challenge if they didn't have some sort of medical intervention. Now, I am not a physician. I am certainly not an OB. I am a physical therapist, and I have done a lot of reading and research into what it means to have an unmedicated birth and what the role of a midwife is, what an OBGYN does, and there are roles for each of them, and they are both extremely valuable. But at the same time, I also want to make sure that I am sharing whatever information I have learned, and that I would encourage you to look up your own information as well, so that you could come to the best decision for you when it comes to having a birth experience that you feel good about and empowered by. So I did link I did have another video previously about my first birth and my experience with that, and how I was hospitalized for 2 days, and how I was told by one of the OBs that I was seeing at the time that my baby might not be able to descend, that I had a higher chance of stillbirth, that because I was over 40, I had, a 50% increased risk of my baby not surviving, that I should induce at 39 weeks because my placenta was going to be too old, and because I was older and my placenta would be too old, and I had COVID, that I just had a whole bunch of things stacked against me. And then in doing some of my own homework and research and reading and looking at the statistics and figuring out what does 50% actually mean, I was able to come to the conclusion that I absolutely trusted in my midwife. And so I did end up changing my care from a hospital centered care to a birth center. So the reason that I am choosing a birth center or home birth this time is I have a lot more confidence. I was able to deliver my first baby unmedicated, and I'm not saying it wasn't intense, and I'm not saying there was no discomfort involved, but I was able to do it, and I would argue that it wasn't even pain. It was just intense. So, for example, I think if you were to talk to somebody who does weightlifting and they were to do a 1-rep max, they would tell you that doing a 1-rep max, a true run rep max, is not a comfortable experience. It's actually very uncomfortable, and it's a huge stress and strain on the body. But they know what that stress and strain is, so they wouldn't describe it as pain. It would just be intense. And I went into my first birth knowing that my body was capable, and that although there might be a high degree of discomfort and pressure, that pain is a warning mechanism from your body to say something is wrong. And I knew that even though what I was feeling was a lot, it was not pain because nothing was wrong. I was okay. So I just had to get my mind right around the idea of being able to withstand non-dangerous discomfort for a certain period of time. And so I prepared the first time by having mantras. I can do this. These pains are not bigger than me. They are me. This is what's going to help me get to meet my baby. I can do this. My body was made for this. I would say those different things to myself as I was laboring, and it helped tremendously. It also helped tremendously that I had a team that I had nothing but trust and faith in. So that would be one of the things is I would encourage, if you're curious about having an out-of-hospital or a non-medicated birth experience, read Ina May's Guide to Childbirth. I read it before my first birth. I just reread it again. It goes over everything that you didn't even know you wanted to know about when it comes to birth and how it's done unmedicated. And also she goes into a lot of the interventions. She goes into how women used to go through general anesthesia to give birth. What is an epidural and how is it administered and what does it do for you and what are the pros and cons. She talks about cesarean section and when those are absolutely necessary, when those might be a good idea, when they're done unnecessarily. And then she talks about the rate at which midwives generally have cesarean sections versus hospitals, and you can kind of talk about that. Another resource that I used a lot to educate myself on birth, pain control, how to enhance your labor, how to breathe during labor, evidence-based birth. It is both a podcast. They put out articles for you to read, and what they do is they synthesize the research to tell you what is the actual research out there about birth and delivery. And one of the key pieces of information I found was that the rates of infection or some sort of poor neonatal outcome in a water birth versus on land, they're no different. There is no statistical difference between delivering a baby in the water or on land when it comes to any sort of infection rate or any sort of deleterious outcome, any sort of bad outcome. So that gave me a lot of confidence to use the water to deliver my baby, because the water is one of the strongest pain control mechanisms that you can use that doesn't alter your body's physiology in any way. And that I felt was really powerful. So I was in the water the first time I delivered in the water. I was unbelievably fortunate. I didn't have any sort of tearing or anything like that. In Ina May's Guide, they also talk about episiotomies, why they were done, why they're no longer done as much, why some physicians might still choose to do them, things like that. It's just worth getting educated on because labor and delivery is a big deal and there's so much to know. The other reason I chose to have a midwife is midwives in general do a really good job of figuring out which people are going to be best suited for their practice. They're only going to choose, they're only going to, like, they know when something is going wrong in pregnancy or when something is not ideal, and they will refer you to the physician. So they have extremely low cesarean section rates. They have extremely low poor outcomes, and then they are really, really good at transfers. So one of the things that might be worth asking a midwife if you're considering one is, what is your hospital transfer rate and why? Because I think different midwives have different tolerances for when they will say, oh, this is no longer a appropriate birth for this situation. We're going to send you to the hospital because you need X, Y, or Z. I like that when I go to the midwife and I have a midwife appointment, they're at least 30 to 45 minutes. So I can ask whatever questions I want. They check on me, they check on the baby, and I feel nothing but confidence. And they talk to me about nutrition and the different sorts of supplements that might be worth considering if I want to give myself the best nutrition and outcomes possible. The other thing I really like about midwives is it's unbelievably personal. At least in my experience, instead of seeing maybe a different physician or a different provider each time I go in, just to make sure that I get to know each one, because you don't know who's going to be on call when you go to deliver. You have your one midwife that you get to know. And you can actually, one of the questions I would have you ask a midwife if you were curious is, how many births do you do a year, or how many clients do you take on a month? Because if they're taking, let's say, 360, if they're doing 360 births a year, that means they're doing one every single day. So what are the chances that you're going to go into labor at the same time as one of their other clients? And if those chances are high, it means you might actually get somebody that's not your primary midwife helping you out. So just making sure that their practice density, how many patients they see, is congruent with whatever it is that you want and you feel the most comfortable with. The other thing is, I feel like midwives they spend more time preparing you physically and your mind mentally in order to be able to be psychologically ready to deliver a baby. Because it takes a certain amount of mental and physical readiness. And if you don't have somebody helping coach you, it could be really challenging. So I will think of more, but for me, I feel like going with a midwife makes me feel more empowered, more prepared, more optimistic, and I get to have it in the setting of my choice, whether it be the midwifery, whether it be the midwifery practice or the birth center, or at my home. If I decide to have it at home or at the practice, at the midwifery practice, I'll let you guys know. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day, and thanks very much for listening. Bye.